Deathbound is not just another Souls clone, it adds in a character swapping mechanic, which is pretty crucial when fighting stronger enemies and bosses. Here is my review of this AA game in 3 parts: the good, the bad, and the extras. The good and the bad are self-explanatory. The extras are the unique parts of the game that I want to point out, which might not directly categorize as good or bad, but is the most important segment of these reviews. There will be highlights about what this game does differently compared to other similar counterparts, so without further ado, let's begin. Deathbound is a Souls-like that generally plays like one. The basics are all here: circle strafing combat, bonfires, souls or EXP that drops on death, and plenty of shortcut porn. It is faster paced than the Dark Souls series, and the movement is less weighty, but your attacks are just as committed. If you're tired of the traditional Souls-like formula, the new character swapping and stamina management system of this game might be the change you are looking for, and I will talk more about that in the extras section. You can easily see this is a budget game. The graphics are average, the animations are rigid, and there's plenty of clipping with your characters. There's also some hitbox issues when you're swinging that looks like you hit the enemy but you miss. The particle effects and lighting can look cheap, and the environment falls into this teal or seafoam green palette for the entire game. Another bad thing is the story, or lack thereof. It is very basic with opposing factions in conflict with one another. You get some additional backstory for the 7 characters or essences that you play as, which also aligns with both sides of the conflict. The enemy variety is not that high either. There's about 3 to 4 enemy types per area, and I think in total there's about 15 enemy types in the entire game, not including the bosses. And you can beat the game in less than 9 hours. There is a new game plus as expected, so you can get some replay value, but I did not feel like going through this more than once. Now the juicy part. While Deathbound is technically a Souls-like, it has a combat system that feels quite different from its counterpart. Instead of changing equipment on your playable character, Deathbound lets you pick 7 unique characters, and each of them plays as a different class. You start with a Knight or Crusader, with your traditional sword and board moveset that can block and parry. As you progress, you absorb the essence of certain dead characters and add them to your roster, and literally becoming them. The second class you get is an Assassin, with faster movement, quick dagger attacks, and instead of blocking, your L1 button shoots a crossbow. And all of these 7 classes have their own base stats and handles differently, ranging from a poison or elemental caster that will damage themselves if you attack too much, to a break-dancing monk. And instead of switching weapons to change your moveset, you swap essences, each with their own stamina and health pool. And when any of them die, you return back to the last bonfire. Raw tagging in a character leaves you vulnerable to attacks, but you can tag in while your bottom sync meter is full to perform a special sync attack that does a big hit and, more importantly, gives you a ton of iframes. This sync mechanic is really important to keep up the damage on tougher enemies. Since each character has their own stamina bar, when you run out of stamina with your current character, swap into a fresh character will let you continue the onslaught since you will have a new stamina bar to work with. I mentioned each soul has different base stats, but you can also make them stronger with the stat tree. Here's where you spend your souls, or EXP in this case. The stat tree gives minor increases to your basic stats like more health, melee damage, or move speed. Then there's the skill tree. It adds unique passives to your essences, some of which have nice synergy. Take the Assassin. She can permanently make her melee inflict poison damage, and you can pair this with her other passive that buffs her attack whenever she kills a poison enemy. But the most useful passive for me comes from the Spear Lady. One of her skills essentially adds the Sekiro mechanic. When you die, you can get back up. This skill has saved me more times than I can count. And you will have to pick 4 characters to use out of the 7, and their positions on your D-pad does make a difference. Each character will have a positive or negative affinity with one another. Placing likable characters next to each other will give them a noticeable buff, while you get a mixed boon and bane for characters that hate each other. This one that reduces 10% move speed really hurts, So that's another aspect to think about when making your team. How do I really feel about Deathbound? The difficulty is a little tough at first, but becomes much easier once you get a handle on the team swapping system. When you learn to manage your stamina, you can keep on the offense for a very long time. One of the earlier bosses took me about a dozen attempts, but I was able to one-shot the final boss, so the balancing is a little weird, especially after I mastered the stamina system. Overall, I score this game a 7 out of 10. It is a nice attempt at a Souls-like that adds something different, but the animation and hitboxes are a bit clunky. I would not recommend buying this game at the full $30 price, but you should try it out when it's on a deep sale. Anyway, thanks for watching the new format for the game reviews, and as always, have fun out there, gamers.